Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's really great. I hope you had a first great day. How many met awesome people today? Yay! Yes. I will close with that note. This community, Kubernetes, is awesome. I'm very excited to be here. I moved to the US about 3 years ago, which means that I spend most of my life in this side of the world. And it feels, speaking here, there is a familiar feeling. And also, most of the people here can pronounce my name easily. And again, Kelsey and I practiced, and I think he did a good job. And I guess this is one of the advantages of open source, getting different people from different places to work together. But let's not get ahead of ourselves and start from the beginning. So, history of Kubernetes. Kubernetes was created by Google based on the experience of running applications like Gmail and Maps in containers. But it was designed to run anywhere. And the team insisted it will be open source. You can imagine it was a hard pitch to make, to encourage to make that decision and take something that was known to be a differentiator for Google and make it open source, available to everybody. And why open source? So developers prefer open source because of the credibility of the technology, because what you see is what you get, right? The freedom of choice. In the last couple of years, we see how enterprises also prefer open source because they can make sure that it meets their need and they can change anything if they would like to. The team hope to build a community around it. The quick feedback loop from users and engaging with other leaders in the community that have experience running workloads elsewhere can help Kubernetes deliver on the promise. Kubernetes can run anywhere at scale. If successful, the innovation pace is unmatchable. So this is an unmatchable innovation pace. So we just released 1.6. Yay! I hope you all got to play with it already. And when I joined the team a year ago, it was hard to get a signal whether we are ready to release, when do we need to stop merging. And one of my personal contributions that we moved to a steady release cadence of every 3 months. It has a calming effect on the community because we know that if we miss the train, there's always the next train. And it really helps the community to work together because the expectations are aligned, right? And we're working like a machine. We define together the release cadence, the release cycle, criteria, and we even have a release team, which is composed by different members of the community. I have heard from users that this is one of the reasons why they like using Kubernetes. They know this innovation doesn't stop. And this is a product and a project that continue to move forward. The way we can grow Kubernetes and keep developing more and more features for you is because the community is growing much faster. Today, this morning, Clayton talked, and he was the first non-Google contributor. And we can see where we are today. So from a dozen of contributors when we just started, today we have over 150 active contributors per month with 1,500 unique contributors. This is a large number. They are working in all time zones. We have people working on Kubernetes from China and Brazil, and of course Germany, and the US and other places in the world. And who are those community members? At the beginning, when it was just open source, the composition was mostly people working from Google. It was 67% people from Google were contributing to the project. This is a year ago. We can already see a big change, a big shift in the commit composition. And I think what is really cool about it is that the next big group is actually individual contributors. Those are the people that are not using their corporate account, or just people from small companies. Let's look how it looks today. In just a year, Google team contribute less than 50%, 42% to be precise. The majority is actually not part of any company or a vendor. And I think this is something that shows how much the community is diverse, right? We have people with different interests, but different opinions. And that's important. That's what makes Kubernetes work. Another thing that you might think that maybe Google stops investing in Kubernetes. I wouldn't be here if that was the case. So we continue in investing more and more. And we have more and more engineers working on Kubernetes. It is just that the community grows much faster than we do. One thing that this graph doesn't show us, it is focusing on commit. But for having high-quality releases and a widely adopted project, there are more skills that are needed. We need PMs, right? Product managers, program managers, marketing, tech writers, developer advocates. We have people in the community that are doing roadshows, educating users how to use Kubernetes, and all of the partners around us. This is what makes Kubernetes successful. We call it the open engagement model. Let's talk a bit some stats, right? So this morning we said this is the way to see how much a project is successful. So GitHub stars, 20,000. We have over 4,000 projects based on Kubernetes, 200 meetup groups worldwide, 50+ products supporting Kubernetes. This open engagement model, this positive cycle is what makes it possible to get to those numbers. First of all, the users. They are very important in our community. That quick feedback loop, right? Learning from them what they need, what we need to work on, is very important. We also invest in helping them to be successful. Their interest drives more interest by developers that are building other projects around Kubernetes, like package managers, mobile apps, everything that is needed for developers. They go and speak at meetups. They write blogs. And all of that, of course, create a business opportunity, right? And this is where we see vendors building a very rich ecosystem around Kubernetes, closing the gap that exists, like distribution and networking solutions and security solutions and storage and monitoring products. Everything helps us to deliver on the promise of Kubernetes runs anywhere. So we see that this is not an open source project. This is an open community. And just to give you an example, if you are users sitting in the audience, we have many users that are sharing their own experience here in KubeCon. Tomorrow, there will be 2 talks. Concor will be talking about how they're using Kubernetes for a multi-cloud solution. And Zalando will share their experience, how to run stateful databases in containers. Make sure you catch both of those talks tomorrow. So what makes it work? You know, the comment that Kelsey made this morning was not something that he planned about being, by looking at people on what they are and always expect the best, right? I think that the one thing that is really important is inclusion. It's creating that environment that all people are welcome and are respected and their ideas are being listened to. Because if you don't have that feeling, then you will not bother to contribute. And that's important because different community members see different sides of the elephant, right? Bringing different perspective of what's important and what's less important. And when each of us listen and respect others, we can all share ideas and think outside of our sandbox. And I think this is the foundation. This is the foundation of Kubernetes community. This is why we are able to attract people and why we see people continue to contribute again and again. And this is also how we can do these cross-organizational teams, transparency, and how we can learn together. I would give 2 examples to demonstrate that. special interest groups, SIGs. SIGs are in the core of the Kubernetes community. They are a group of people with the same interest or area of focus, and they meet together regularly to discuss that topic. Think about solutions, roadmap, triage issues, delivery, everything you might think an engineering team with the same interest will do. The most important thing is that they make decisions. And without that, this wouldn't have be able to work. Because with a community that big, 1,500 contributors, we must distribute the leadership and allow others to make decisions. I want to give 2 examples. The first one is a SIG node. They meet every Tuesday at 10 a.m., but they also have a special Asia time-friendly meeting, which is very important, and you can see it very common in different SIGs. When I talk with customers about, or users about Kubernetes, they tell me, once you set it up, it just works. SIG node is one of those SIGs that makes it just work. There is a lot of work behind the scene to make sure that Kubernetes is so reliable. And I wanted to highlight that work, right? Sometimes this is not at the main stage, but without their work, Kubernetes wouldn't be what it is today. One feature that is beta in 1.6 is node allocatable. This is not an easy name. But it allows you to secure resource allocations for system pods on your node, so like kubeproxy. And then it won't be compromised by other workload pods, and it will not be evicted, for example. Another SIG I would like to highlight is SIG auth. And this is, again, I really think this is one of the most exciting features in 1.6, role-based access control, RBAC, and this morning you have seen the demo by Aparna. And they had a team, right, so we have people from Red Hat and CoreOS and Google and others working together to make sure that they deliver that to you. But we have 24 SIGs, right? That can be overwhelming because there are so much things to do around Kubernetes. And they continue forming and evolving and having new features. They have roadmap, backlogs, based on your users' needs and community interest. They move really fast. Face-to-face meetings, even if on a video call, really helps that going. Meetings are usually recorded. Notes are available on GitHub. And this is part of us making sure that everything is transparent and decisions are being transparent. But still, it can be overwhelming. Who feels that this is overwhelming? Or Kubernetes community is overwhelming? Yes, people in the back. And you know, and it is a bit overwhelming. I get that, right? So I think that the SIGs are actually a great way to contribute and to start to work with the community. You can choose one of the SIGs you like, something that you are passionate about. First time, just come to the meeting. You'll be able to match a face to a name. This means that you will know someone on Slack instead of just sending something to everybody, and you can start to contribute. But it is overwhelming, and one of the challenges that this creates is how do you sync all those SIGs together, right? So we distributed the decisions, but we need also to converge, because sometimes we see, towards the end of the release, of course, how some items coming from different SIGs contradicts. And so this is an example of something of how we learn. So on top of those 24 SIGs, we also have a special SIG, which is 6 PM, product managers and program managers. And they came up with the feature repo. And what we do there is, and this is still an experiment, and we are evolving, but all the SIGs will enter their features for the release. And 2 weeks into the release, we will freeze that. And this will be our ability to track where the features are, and what progress they are making, and whether they are ready for release. It will also allow us to build the documentation and make sure that we didn't miss anything, or even have the block coverage that's needed. Lastly, we also use that SIG as planning, right? So in the morning, we saw that we have a roadmap. So how do you set a roadmap for Kubernetes community. The PM SIG is doing that. And we definitely don't know everything, right? And as much as the community continues to grow, there are more and more new challenges which we need to adapt to. So we make sure that we keep learning together. And we have part of our check and balances is our community retrospective after every release. It is recorded, and there are notes that are being done while everybody speaks. And it's very common to get an action item from one person on the community to another, and to take it really seriously, right? Because this is what we do. We care about what other people are saying. And it seems like that works, right? So this is just an example of two community users, and they appreciate the technology, but they also appreciate the community and the openness around it. When choosing a technology, you are making that decision for today, but also for the future, right? You want to make sure that the technology you have chosen will be able to adjust and also answer your future needs. The same is with the community, right? As the community grows, we need to think about the future and how we make sure that we keep this success sustainable. There are three areas that I think that we need to invest in this year: conformance, open standards, and velocity. So why conformance? First of all, I think this is our responsibility to our users. Users, when they make decisions, they want to make informed decisions. If you're choosing to partner with someone or integrate with another company, you want to make sure that they are compliant with Kubernetes and that you'll be able to upgrade to the next release and you'll get benefits of new features. You also want to make sure that your workloads can move from different platforms. The promise of Kubernetes, that Kubernetes can run anywhere, requires conformance tests to make sure that it actually happens. And this is something that the community is really behind that idea. Because what we acknowledge that there is a risk of fragmentation. Today, there are over 30 distributions. And as a community, we want to make sure that we are compliant, right? And today, I don't have the right tooling for that. So probably in that process, we will need to define the scope, hopefully even narrow the scope of conformance that is needed, but create the right tooling and mechanism that if I'm having, for example, Google Container Engine, I want to make sure that you have the freedom of choice, and you can come or leave and move your workloads elsewhere, because this is the promise and the value proposition of Kubernetes. Freedom of choice and open matters beyond Kubernetes. We acknowledge that. And that's why I think open standards are very important. And since we have such strong voice today, I think the Kubernetes community has to invest more in building those open standards. The user benefits are clear, right? The ability to make a choice, but also I think that by having those open standards, vendors can innovate elsewhere. So the innovation will be much bigger and much faster if we'll have those standards that everybody will be compliant with. And this is the idea behind composable systems, right? That you can change things around. I want to give 3 examples for that. The first one is the container network interface. And while this is discussed as part of the Kubernetes network SIG, there are more people involved in that. The spec was proposed by CoreOS, and the idea is to define how to configure network interface for Linux containers. Another example would be the Open Service Broker API. This was donated by the Cloud Foundry. And this is where we have people like from Red Hat and Deis and Cloud Foundry, IBM, and others working together to establish a standard for consuming and delivering services in a simple way with cloud-native platforms like OpenShift and Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes. The last one I want to mention is CSI, not the TV show, but it just stuck, so this is the name for now. A container storage interface. And this is where, in our mind, we want to make sure that if a storage plugin author can only write one plugin, right, instead of trying to integrate with all containers orchestrator out there today. This means that we have people from Docker and Mesos and Kubernetes working together to come up with that. Having common interfaces support those composable systems. Yes. And velocity. I've started the presentation showing how great is the Kubernetes velocity. It becomes harder and harder, right? The scope of the project is bigger, and I am still in favor of really short cycles, and release cadence should be high. But it probably means that we need to rethink how the project is structured and make sure to allow more flexibility and more agility for both the developers and the release process. We need to do it while thinking about the user, right? We don't want to confuse you. And we will start to doing that this year. The other thing is about the contributor ladder. So we grew that big, but if you are new and you don't want to follow my suggestion about joining the SIG, it will be hard for you to understand how you start and how can you grow and increase your ownership within the community. This is something that we have to do. We have to document our contributor ladder and make those decisions. And last, it's time we document how we operate, right? It cannot be just something that we know, because we have new members, and we talked about transparency. So we need to talk about our governance model. We want to make sure that we keep it simple, but still transparent, and also meet the new size of the community. How do we deal when different SIGs are conflicting? And this is how success looks like, right? So thinking about those ideas is important, because we see Kubernetes here for the future to come. Kubernetes is an awesome community. And those are all good challenges. And the important thing is that the ball is in our court, making sure that we make this success sustainable. So if you want to help us and make Kubernetes even greater, I welcome you to join us. And thank you.